here on time.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, Michael.
Hi. Welcome. Hope everybody's warmed up. My name is Michael Bang. I run the Oakland chapter of Balanced Breakfast, and I also play in a dance grunge band called Tell Me. If anybody's going to San Jose tonight, we're playing there tonight.
Nice.
And this is the Music for Change panel. Welcome to it. Let's introduce ourselves one at a time.
Hey there, good morning everybody. My name is Marlon Richardson, go by the artist name Unlearn the World. And I am an arts educator, MC, producer, and executive director of Hip Hop for Change in Oakland, California.
Hi, my name is Pete Kronowitt. I'm a singer-songwriter based in San Francisco. I've been using my performances for different causes, and now I'm on the board of Music Declares Emergency, a climate music industry organization, and we'll be talking a little bit about how artists can get engaged.
Awesome. Welcome, everyone. We're going to start real small. Music for Change. Let's start with just, how has music changed your life in particular?
Okay, let's start small. Wow. Who here hasn't just absorbed music and it's just part of you. It is the thing that guides you to feel, to interpret the world to some extent, right? And then you create your own music, and that gives you an opportunity to internalize how to communicate those feelings. So yeah, music is fundamental in how it's changed me.
Yeah, I would say music, since I was young, right? Like music, it's how I know emotion to sound like. Right, like the things that I was feeling, if I could articulate them, it would be in some of the favorite songs from my favorite artists since I was a kid. So that's always been like being a hypersensitive kid and being an artist in training, so to speak. You find some level of solace in music because you are at least empathizing with the emotions and the experiences of others. So like just hearing those stories and having that sonic landscape to some of these experiences and these stories that you're listening to from some of your favorite artists really gives you kind of like the blueprint to eventually empower yourself to do music yourself. So by the time I was 13, it was like, I am a musician who loves music, so yeah.
Yeah, I can totally identify with. Music is a way of explaining emotion. I think if somebody asked me when I was 13, how do you feel? I would have been like, well, do you have all day? Because I don't know, so I'm gonna just work it out. But if, I could just be like, oh, this song is how I feel. Music has changed me. I think, I remember being something like 6 years old, and my cousin was like, hey, do you want to hear the first heavy metal band ever? And he took me into his room and played Black Sabbath. And I was like, oh, this is what I've been looking for my whole life. I was 6. I was not looking for anything, but that definitely, just stepping into that room and hearing that music totally changed me. Okay, so that's how music has changed you. Let's step it up. The people around you, the community you're a part of, how do you think music changes or can change those things?
Well, we're in the Bay Area where musician or artistry, education, and activism have a lot of intersections, right? And part of that is because most artists who are trying to make a living in one of the most expensive places on earth have to be activists to advocate for themselves and have to be educators on one level or another. So you have a lot of dual identity in terms of being a music teacher, but then also gigging, and then from there, trying to advocate for whatever policies or practices either on a local or a national level. So I see that a lot, especially in Oakland, California, where my organization's based. And as an organization, Hip Hop for Change, we've been around 10 years, and we started literally as a grassroots effort to get paid gigs for local hip hop artists who historically have been kind of left out of the live music game because you have big, more well-known stars coming in and performing and not really giving opportunity to artists. So it started as just a grassroots means of getting local rap artist gigs, evolved into like a fully active hip hop nonprofit that goes into schools and provides arts education. So we're not only just providing kids a means of expressing themselves through hip hop and rap and making beats, but we're also exposing them to all the different elements in hip hop culture. So that goes to breakdancing, that goes to graffiti, DJing, right? And then exposing them as they get older to different career pathways within all of these different means of expression, right? So that takes community. That can't just be me or any one singular person or group. It takes us leveraging reputation and relationships within the community to bring forth these kind of initiatives. So you're talking actively to local artists who have very aligned values in terms of that. Just being on the scene, you'll know, oh, this person does this person does that. So you're able to kind of bring them into the fold to kind of affect this kind of change and see what the opportunities areas are within our local artist communities and where we align, where our local artist communities can put their attention in order for us to thrive, right? We share a lot of the same ills and issues and pains, but we don't always express those things. So to have those environments like this one or other outlets where we can share best practices or just commiserate in one way or another, those things are always helpful because they spark conversation, or at least they spark the emotion that can drive change within any local artist community.
Yeah, I love that, Marlon. And I think there's the slow change, the change that, like when you were saying, how did music change your life? That you internalize. Maybe it's Black Sabbath, but it's also, you internalize the lyrics, you internalize, the places that were talked about in the song and the concepts that were talked about as well. And then, so there's the slow change, but then there's the what can music really do to facilitate change on a broader level? And I think that's the opportunity. I think Billy Bragg has a great quote, and he uses different forms of it. But if you don't know Billy Bragg, he's calls himself a socialist. He's out of the UK and a social justice singer-songwriter. He says songs don't change the world. And the different versions are bands don't change the world. Artists don't change the world. The audience does. And that idea that like this. You start with this thing that attracts you, the piece of art, and then it brings you to a place where you're more open. Your ability to absorb not just the song, but also the environment around you, whether it's in a venue or it could be the issues that the song is bringing up. But then it's really, as Marlon says, the community. Where you go with that community to make change, and that's kind of the big thing. I mean, I'm not really a fan of panel sessions. I'm really not, but because I feel like we talk about a lot of stuff, and this is Pride Weekend. It's a celebration of diversity in the Bay Area and San Francisco. I love San Francisco, and I love the diversity here. This is a beautiful place, but there are problems that we have, not just in the city, but in the country, in the world. And I feel this sense of urgency that we really actually need to do something about it. I mean, I joined an organization called Music Declares Emergency, and I really feel like that's where we're at. And so, that's why I'm not a fan of talking about things unless we're like giving really explicit advice about how to get to the place where we can make change.
Yeah. This is
that,
great.
didn't I?
Yeah, perfect. So it brings us to the actual topic, music for change, and the actual question, can music change anything? And we've been touching on it and dancing around it, but can music change anything?
I talk from a hip hop perspective, right? Music changed me at a very early age. Hip hop music specifically. It was the first time in my upbringing that I could see people who looked like me exude a level of confidence and articulation that I hadn't seen up until that point. And this is me being 10 years old, then starting to take rap music seriously and start writing at the early age, endeavoring into the music industry. But all this time, I'm reading and doing things that are changing who I am as a person. And I use that as a means of informing my educational practices. So as a teaching artist, I start with the premise that hip hop, in fact, is remix culture, right? One of the very first rappers, Grandmaster Caz, he was from a group called the Cold Crush. They were like the blueprint to what then became the Sugar Hill Gang and other groups like that. He said hip hop didn't invent anything, it reinvented everything, right? It is in fact remix culture. What you're ultimately remixing is yourself. Right, so it starts with the self. When we ever, the Gandhi term, be the change you want to see in the world. Like these are things that really start at a very foundational, intrinsic level in terms of bringing forth the kind of world you want to see. But that revolution starts in the human being, right? So through arts education, which is what I focus on, we're giving kids these tools for them to identify the things in themselves that help them amplify their identity and their personality, first and foremost. And the hope is that you carry that energy with you and inspire others to do the same. You build community under this premise of self-improvement, personal growth, and then that kind of echoes throughout whatever ecosystem you're part of, whatever community you're part of, because you're all aligned in that you all want to be better than how you were the day before, right? So hip-hop has been struggling with that over the last 50 years. We recognize that there's a culture there that was introduced or created by young marginalized kids in order to kind of find healing and find wellness in one way or another, or just to be safe in this crazy environment called the hood, right, in the Bronx or wherever they came up. And we now have to wrestle with that dynamic against a multi-billion-dollar music industry that looks to exploit the very kids who are using this art to try to heal themselves, right? And they think that their healing is rooted in materialism, money, exposure, attention, social media likes, clicks. So we fight with acquiescing to a music industry that is using metrics to determine your self-worth, as opposed to something that's more existential and more almost spiritual in a sense. And hip hop has been dealing with that struggle since its inception, right? So that spills over to the larger societal issue is how do artists in the midst of trying to pay rent in the first, right? Rent is due on Monday, right? At a certain point at the end of the month, I stopped thinking about global problems, political problems, because I'm still trying to scratch out rent. At the same time, try to be my most authentic self in the world without having to code switch, right? So until artists can get into a space where we can pay rent on the month without having to code switch our lives, we have a lot of work to do, So hip hop has been trying to advocate, at least my organization as a nonprofit that deals in hip hop, really works to do that, to give artists those resources so that they can change themselves. And once those needs are met, we can really conquer the larger issues and really organize to address whatever's happening at City Hall, to address what's happening in the White House or the dog and pony show that is our electoral process right now, right? We can't do that if we're still kind of held back by our urgent needs or our emotional needs that are keeping us from being the most amplified artists that we try to be.
Yeah, I love that. And also, this idea of remixing, I'm a singer-songwriter, but I also did not rely on music for income. I chickened out and worked in the corporate world. I'm, very clear, very clear about and I also look back, and I think that if I had dedicated myself like I did with my career, my job in the tech world, I think I would have done okay. I really do. I probably would have figured it out the way I figured it out in business. But what I've learned is that remixing, the idea of building upon, innovating marginally, incrementally over time, is how everything works, how society works, how we all work together. Everything that we look, everything around us, everything we see was built on incremental innovation. But then that other thing, especially what Marlon was talking about, that that switch that you need to flip in order to say, okay, I now have enough of my basic needs met that I can actually do something and and not just help others, but help myself and bring others along with me, you know, that's not an easy thing to do. Okay, so I think I'm at the point where, you know, so this is something that, you know, I struggled with a lot. You know, when I was a young kid, my sister developed diabetes, and when my parents figured out diabetes is actually a pretty serious disease, there's complications, it cuts life by a third, you have heart disease and all kinds of complications. You know, they invited these, you know, these 3 other couples over to our apartment, and they started a foundation. And that's not normal. That is not what normal people do. But when you're in a desperate situation and you realize that, you know, the government funding is not going to research, that the nonprofits that you're working with, they're not funneling money to where they're going to solve the problem. So that's what my parents did. And it taught me a lesson that, you know, that we need to take control. All of us individually need to take control and do things and make a difference. So when I started realizing that, you know, and I, you know, to be like really clear, when Trump won the presidency, I was like freaked out. I just could not believe that this country made that decision. And so I got really engaged, and I, you know, started doing a lot of activism with electoral groups. I also worked with other, you know, grassroots organizations, learned what they were doing. The innovations that they came up with in 2017 were really powerful. And those things are in process today, and they're mature organizations. At the same time, I was like, all right, so why aren't there more of us engaged? Why, you know, they're paying their rent, they're taking their kids to school and to, you know, soccer practice or whatever they're really doing. I mean, I don't have kids, so I gotta like make assumptions. But you know, I was like, I would walk into a coffee shop and I'd look around and like, what is the path for everybody else to get engaged? And so I spent the last 6 years figuring that out, and I think we've come up with at least a reasonably good answer that will improve over time. And if you'll just give me a minute, I'll kind of outline what it is. So at Music Declares Emergency, we've come up with a program. We're calling it Amplify. The idea is it makes it really, really simple for any artist of any size, stadium level artists and singer-songwriters without much of a following like myself because they're in the tech world, that you can just plug in and become as effective as possible. Because so the main thing is, like, the artist wants to do something and make a difference, but artists are not normally like you. They're not like me. You know, artists are not normally activists, right? It takes a lot of work to figure out what works and what doesn't. So what Music Declares Emergency has done over the last year and a half is vetted a whole bunch of different organizations, and now we've come up with a very select, curated group where we take their existing programs. So in other words, we're not burdening these organizations with asking them to change what they do, but we take their existing organizations that they have proven that they work, and we're taking artists and say, okay, so what can you do to help these organizations? And there's a really simple way. We recruit people, volunteers to help these organizations. And that's it. I mean, that's like, it's not rocket science, but it's not easy to figure out which organizations. So we've picked 3 organizations to start out with. One, focus on voter registration, because we're in election year, and this is an important election. I mean, yeah, to say it nominally, right? You know, the other organization, and I'm really excited about this organization, is the Environmental Voter Project. And I'll get back to why it's so important. Basically, they get people out to vote where we need it most. And the third organization is kind of what we're looking forward to. Is it's called Climate Change Makers, and what they do is they turn regular folks into citizen lobbyists. So they contact their state and federal elected officials, and they lobby. They argue for what policies and legislation they want passed. And it's very, you know, you can do it from anywhere, but they localize it in every state. So, because that's where most of the laws get passed. So let me go back to the Environmental Voter Project real quick, and then I'll close with how this program actually works. So the Environmental Voter Project, the reason why I'm so jazzed about that is because what they do is they work in 19 states across the country. They identify people who already look at themselves as environmentalists, and they're registered to vote, but they don't normally go vote. They're low propensity voters. And then they have 5 different tactics. And they also make sure that these folks are in competitive congressional districts. And that means that when we focus our efforts, there's a chance that by getting more people out to vote in these districts that, we can actually make a difference. It doesn't waste our volunteer efforts at races that don't have any chance. So then they use 5 tactics to make sure that we get these voters out, and they do so on a consistent basis. They've already gotten 1.5 million environmentalists into regular, consistent super voters. So they call them, they knock on doors, they send texts and postcards, and then they do very targeted digital marketing and send direct mail. So they're a very effective group. And so the way that the program works is an artist says, hey, I want to do something. Then what we do as Music Declares Emergency is we give you the high-level, easy call to action that you can use in social media or in your performances. Really simple. Join Environmental Voter Project as a volunteer. Now, we don't need hundreds of thousands of people doing this. We need to turn a couple thousand to 10,000, 20,000 volunteers, and we'll make a difference in this election coming up. And there's a lot of artists who are interested in doing this.
Thank you so much. Yeah, give it up. Okay, if you are like me, you are sitting out there listening and you've retained maybe half of what's been said. So let's do another quick round of intros. Tell us who you are and what organization and what you're doing and what you represent.
And a website too, if you have one.
Yes. Once again, my name is Marlon Richardson. You see it there. I go by the artist name Unlearn the World. I'm an MC, producer, executive director, education director of Hip Hop for Change. We're an Oakland-based 501c3. We've been around 10 years. We've taught over 40,000 program participants the true foundational principles and history of hip hop, its culture, and exposing kids kindergarten through 12th grade into all the elements of hip hop, as well as at the collegiate level. We do social justice events. We do arts education, obviously, and we do a lot of grassroots activism and collaborate with a lot of different nonprofits all throughout the Bay Area. But we're really here as a resource to hip hop culture bearers, hip hop artists. We have a recording studio in Oakland that's free for young people 24 and under. They can come in on Wednesdays. We call it Writing Camp Wednesdays, and they just write, record. They work with industry professionals like myself, our engineer, our other artist mentors. We have our Pipeline of Positivity program that exposes young systems impacted youth into different career fields within hip hop. We have a film studio and recording studio here in the Hunters Point Bayview neighborhood of San Francisco. And again, it's really about combining social justice, wellness into the ethos of every single hip hop artist in the Bay Area and around the country, so that they can find best practices to get out of their own way as artists and heal themselves as they are expressing themselves.
Yeah, change is positive. Social change happens through a wide variety of different ways, and I've known of Hip Hop for Change for a long time, and I think the work that they do is really important. And then my name is Pete Kronowitt. As I mentioned, I'm a board member for Music Declares Emergency. It's musicdeclares.net. If you go to musicdeclares.net, there's a bunch of flags on the right-hand side. On the right-hand side of the screen. So the organization was started in the UK back in 2019. They came up with this slogan: "No music on a dead planet." Kind of catchy. Well, and actually it caught the attention of a bunch of music industry folks and a bunch of very prominent artists. So there's over 8,000 folks who have signed the declaration now across the world, including huge acts like Billie Eilish, who wears the shirt on stage and she puts it on the marquee. There's a whole bunch of really big name acts who have signed the declaration. And then the organization is now in 16 different countries around the world, and each chapter operates independently. So the U.S. chapter started in 2022. We're a 501c3, so a nonprofit here in the U.S. And it's taken us a while to kind of get our feet on the ground and get this program. But this is we're just rolling out this program now. We've now signed stadium level artists and a whole bunch of indie, mid-level, lower tier artists to work on the program. And so this idea of this amplified program where you get a call to action from a specific grassroots partner, that call to action and the partner is going to change over time when the needs of the climate movement change. So when we get, after the election, we'll move to holding elected officials accountable. When there's some direct action, because, we're going to go and protest on the streets for something, or there'll be some other kind of direct action, we will change the call to action and we'll have hundreds, if not thousands of artists in the US specifically, coordinated on getting volunteers to do these specific things. And that's how we make change. That's how we work together. So we're going to build community. We're going to figure out how to it's not difficult. It's not difficult. It's not easy. It's not easy to get up on stage and kind of, you're doing hip hop and you're singing, about whatever it is, and then you want to bring it down to something real. Like you want to say, okay, I want you to pay attention to me, but now I want you to shift and I want you to take out your phone and remember what I'm saying. Write down this. Copy this QR code and sign on. And that's not an easy thing to do. So as a community of artists, we need to talk to each other about how to do this. This is it's like figuring out that way to that balance of keeping authentically with what you want to communicate to the people that you're performing for, and being able to also say, and there's issues and we can all solve them if we work together and you do this. And it just takes practice, and it also takes examples. And so that's what we're doing. We're also putting artists together with artists to go talk about these things.
Oh, we do have a website. Thanks for reminding me. hiphopforchange.org. That's FOR, not for, because that would be better. But hiphopforchange.org, or Instagram is hiphop4change. We're super confusing. So.
Awesome. Okay, I'd like to go back to the basic artist needs question. The I'm not focused on change because I need to pay rent in a week question. I'm not sure. I don't know. I don't have like a specific direct way into this, but in general, both because of the financial need, but also the amount of attention that you have to give the financial need, I feel like it's often very difficult for an artist to focus on change. They're focused on their music first, maybe their rent first, maybe their music first, maybe the both, and the nature. I guess I'll speak less generally and I'll speak more personally. When I write music, I'm not thinking about how to change the world with my song. I'm writing a song to express something, and when I'm performing that music, I'm trying to communicate to the audience, and when I'm doing gigs, I'm trying to make enough money to make rent and so on. And so change is often, and also I'm tired a lot. I have a lot of stuff to do today, and I'm tired, and I'm not sure how much time and effort I can think about and put effort into change. So there's not a specific question there, but just a general topic. How do we deal with that?
I think for a lot of people, and I would say for people in this room, your music and your creative outlet is part of your survival. That is how you're navigating through this circus that is the United States, right? Just recognizing I need to do this. It doesn't matter if I don't have food. It doesn't matter if I'm sleeping in a car. It doesn't matter where I am on earth. I'm still going to do this. That is very intrinsic to every artist that I know or that I have the pleasure of meeting. So it's very much part of who we are in our identity. We do it regardless of the circumstance. I think the circumstances change when you're declaring to yourself at one point or another, I would like to make a living off of my art. That's a very different distinction than somebody who works a 9-to-5 job and then plays guitar on the weekends, right? I worked right there in Powell Street in insurance for 10 years. Still doing music, but I recognized that I had a family to feed, I had people to take care of, and it wasn't until I did an artist trip to Cuba where it ignited that passion that I had, and it reminded me of my 15-year-old self that said, I want to be a rapper, an activist, an educator. And it took easily 3 years of deep personal growth and being broke, having baby mama dramas, all the things, for me to get to the point where I could say in my 40s, I am an artist, a rapper, an activist, and an educator, right? So it was me having to do the war, in the internal war work, in order to get to my actual authentic self. But that took, so many different circumstances had to align in order for that to happen. And I recognize that not everybody has that level of luxury, privilege, whatever. But the artistry is still there. People need art to feel sane in an insane society. So trying to match that with your basic needs in a society is also just a struggle in general. But I think the more you can articulate that struggle, the more you're going to find camaraderie and community and people who are going to uplift you in one way or another, simply just to function, let alone thrive, right? We all want to thrive, but I think survival is where a lot of us are, at least on an artistic level or in a Bay Area income level or whatever the case is. Like, we're in survival mode, but for many of us, part of that survival mode is still being an artist. And yeah, there's no silver bullet solution to it. You know, it's figuring it out in terms of what are your best practices. What are you willing to do versus what you're not willing to do, and why you're not willing to do certain things, or why you're inclined to do certain things. This is all still a personal journey, like, experience. And the more honest you are with yourself, the easier it'll become to navigate through these things.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, this idea that as an artist, there are a wide variety of things that will motivate you, that will inspire you. I mean, it could just be a riff. It could just be, like you're just playing on whatever instrument you like, and you just hear something, all of a sudden that just motivates you. And I think that idea of finding your way forward through your art, and then looking at the world around you, eventually and hopefully you see things around you that you want to where you want to make a difference, and then you just have to decide how much you're going to put yourself out there. You're either you're going to pay the rent and you're going to do what motivates you and hopefully it appeals to other people, or you're going to you'll do it as commercially viable. But you're going to do what motivates you, right? And so at some point, you can decide whether you're going to take this thing that you look around the world and you see, there's something I don't like. There's something that I'm really concerned about. And just because I'm part of Music Declares Emergency, let's just take climate change, just because it might be somewhat of a significant problem. A little bit. And maybe you care a little bit about future generations. Maybe you know someone with kids if you don't have them, which is my case. I just think that humanity might be worth saving. Maybe. Yeah, I'm still having some doubts after watching that debate the other night. But like you see one old guy he's really basically a decent guy, and another guy just calling him. Call him out with lies and stuff like that. And there's a lot of people who like him, and that bothers me. Like, what the hell is going on? That Anyway, so here's the calculation. Back to your kind of question is, I think looking at an example of someone who brands themselves as someone who wants to make change. And let me just bring up this one artist named A.Y. Young. A.Y. Young. I don't know what motivated him originally, but he's done more than 900 shows using solar power that he calls the Battery Tour. The guy he's an amazing performer. He's a great songwriter. But then he made a decision that he was going to write one song for each of the 17 United Nations Development Goals. And then he did it one further, each song, he got a corporate sponsor, an NGO, and a celebrity for each song. So and what he does is that, of course, the celebrity brings attention to the song and the cause, right? And then the corporation then funds the NGO's project. And the dude is now on world stages singing for tens of thousands of people. He has branded himself as a smart activist with great songs. And all of it is possible. It's just a matter of like, you have to make a decision in the spectrum. I like country music. I want to get people to dance, or whatever it is, and then you can make it really easy, like we're trying to do, and say, hey, climate's a problem. You want to get involved. Here's a really easy way to go. Just here's a QR code, and then you just leave it alone. Or you could be AY Young and see that as an example. I think there's a spectrum there that that we can all fit in and make a difference.
Totally. Speaking of climate change and the presidential debate, I want to talk about hopelessness. Oftentimes, for me, for example, I'm a small indie artist. I feel like nothing I do is going to impact such gigantic problems. So, what specifically in your work and in your lives do you think you do to deal with just general hopelessness?
I have a luxury of hope. That's me, right? I represent and speak for a community and a version of myself that was hopeless, right? It's hard for black and brown kids in the hood to care about climate change when they have to walk through neighborhoods where they can get shot. That to them is the more immediate need, right? It's hard to reach that kid and talk about skinny polar bears when they're thinking about that dynamic, right? So that's survival to them on one level versus the larger existential crisis that is climate change, right? But once we can get them away from that, then they may be a little bit more receptive to the idea of being a good steward of the earth. Maybe just basic recycling to begin with, and then moving from there. Like, we have a program called Agents of Change. We've partnered with East Bay Regional Parks District to get a host of 10 young artists and pay them over the course of a week to be an artist in residence and write hip-hop projects that are based on concepts around climate change, around the local ecology of the parks, around just being good stewards of the earth. So it's very much rooted in our ethos as an organization to do that kind of work. But it takes a lot of pre-work and primering of the young people to even get them to be willing to do that, when there are so many other issues and crises that they need to be addressed, or that need to be addressed for them. It's just kind of hard to balance that. And I lost what your question was again in terms of like.
Commenting on what you just said, I had a friend who was an addict, and I was asking, like, so many people in addiction 12-step programs end up smoking cigarettes. Why isn't that like that's also going to kill you? And he's like, you got to deal with things in the order that they're killing you.
Yeah. Precisely. It was hopeless.
Yeah.
Right. So we're taking kids who may have feelings of despair or hopelessness that they have yet to accept. Right. Just the very fact that you are endeavoring into self-destructive life patterns reflects a level of subconscious hopelessness. Fuck it, right? Like, I mean, I don't know if we could, but that's right. So it's always there. It's always looming. I speak to my own luxury because I've declared for myself to live a purpose-driven life. There's the larger purpose and the existential purpose of why I think I'm here, but that can be reverse engineered to these little micro stories. The thing I need to do by the end of the year. That's what's giving me hope, because I'm forever driving myself in one direction or another. I think what you're talking about is when you stop driving. It's when you just have to, like, you're in paralysis almost. And paralysis can show up in many different ways. It could be you sitting in front of your TV watching Jeopardy, completely blank, staring into the screen, right? Or it could be not paying your bills, just fuck off, like they're not getting paid because I just don't have, like, there's a lot of different levels of hopelessness, and I think that we can address these. A lot of it is through mental health. I think that that's an important factor as we talk about communities of color, as we talk about artist communities. Mental health needs to be at the forefront of a lot of our discussions, because that's at least going to remove the hopelessness on one level or another, or at least help us figure out why we're feeling so hopeless. And however that looks for you, it could be one-on-one talk there, it could be drum circles, it could be, whatever it is. But I think that that's one way to address any level of hopelessness within artist communities or things of that nature.
Yeah, I think this, asking people who are already, who are activists about the idea of hopelessness is a little odd, because we're so engaged with what we're doing, it's hard to remember what it was like being hopeless, because once you cross that chasm of like, I'm gonna just do something, I'm gonna get engaged, you start to feel empowered. There's something that changes, and as an independent artist, as someone, even without a big following, bringing a couple people along with you, that is a force multiplier. You just don't know what's going to happen when you bring a couple people with you. And so, it doesn't have to be Billie Eilish standing on stage and saying, or, Taylor Swift saying, everybody should register to vote, and then she gets thousands and thousands of people to register to vote. No, it doesn't need to be that. I'm like you, Michael. I decided I was going to go play shows for small political campaigns in Virginia, and so I found competitive campaigns, just like Environmental Voter Project finds competitive campaigns, and then I did shows for the candidates, and I got 106 people to go knock on doors in Virginia in an off election year, and then the party that I cared about, which I imagine a couple people in here do, they won control of all three, the upper and lower chamber of the House and the governor's mansion. Then I saw what happened. Then I saw, and this is like that moment where, for me, everything really changed. Because then I saw this amazing set of laws. I saw laws about voting rights. I saw laws about climate change, gun violence, human rights. It was this remarkable set of things happened that I was a small part of, but I know that I really materially contributed. And so, what I would say is, yes, it feels like the world is much bigger than we can do anything about. But there's something that happens when you then, there's another quote that I really love by Bill McKibben. And again, this is about climate. Bill McKibben started 350.org. Someone says, what can I do as an individual to, about climate change? And Bill McKibben's answer was really simple. It says, stop being an individual. And so the answer is, get other people to join grassroots organizations that are effective. And, Hip Hop for Change appears to be an effective organization. That would be a great place to start in Oakland. Yeah. Environmental Voter Project seems to be an effective organization to get people out to vote in particular areas. So, those are ways that people can get engaged and make a real difference.
I just wanted to add that I think hopelessness is when we feel when we start recognizing or accept that someone is writing the story for us. As opposed to us taking the autonomy to write our own story, right? And there's a challenge to your point about stopping being an individual. Thank you. But there needs to be this better balance between individualism and collectivism. We have to figure that out in this country, right? If everything is individualist, if everything is, we've now all become brands and micro celebrities. When you live in a world that way, you are siloing yourself from the larger picture that is the empathy and compassion that's going to get us out of this matrix of mess, right? So you have to find, we're struggling in that balance right now, right? Caring for the earth versus caring for ourselves is like this dynamic needs to find some bridge to kind of make things better for us.
Thank you. This is something I do in the Oakland Balanced Breakfast meetups, which is just introduce ourselves multiple times part of the point is because, as I said before, when I'm out in that audience, I don't retain everything that's being said up here. But number two, it also gets us to get our intros shorter, get right to the point. I'm Michael Bang, I run Oakland Balanced Breakfast, and I play in a band called Tell Me Tell Me.
My name is Marlon Richardson. I go by the artist name Unlearn the World. I am the executive director of Hip Hop for Change, and I'm a Scorpio.
But yeah, I got to go there, right? My name is Pete Kronowitt. I'm a singer-songwriter here in San Francisco on the board of Music Declares Emergency, and I'm definitely a Taurus.
Nice. Thank you. And is there one thing you want this audience to take away today?
Just thanks for showing up for yourselves, for us, for your community. That's all. And keep showing up. That's all. Just like keep showing up and whatever's important to you, keep showing up. Right? It gets muddy out here. It gets really greasy out here. You see the silver lining the more you just keep plugging away. And that is a lot easier said than done, but trust me when I tell you there is a silver lining to all of this.
So I'd say if you're in this audience, and Stefan, thank you. You decided that there's going to be a panel session on this topic, so thank you for that. Michael, thank you for hosting it. That means you guys care. You are the core in the Bay Area of artists who actually care enough to come to this kind of session. So yeah, thank you. And I would say the one thing I'd remember is that find your place, find a grassroots organization that you can support. Don't change it, just figure out how you can support it. A great way to do that is just to plug into our Amplify program, musicdeclares.net. You go to, musicdeclares.net/US, and you can find our Amplify program. And that's what I'd say, the one thing you should remember.
And I will say that for the Music for Change panel, the one thing I want you to take away is that if you think this panel could have been better, you can change this panel. There are applications to speak at these things, but also like sometimes people just didn't show up, like somebody agreed to speak and they couldn't be here, and not blaming or shaming. But you can be up here. If you think there's something that we didn't say, you could be here to say it. So apply, talk to Stefan, be part of the Balanced Breakfast community. If you want things to be different, you can make them different. Thank you.
Good meeting you. Yeah. You have